Still of the night, I think of you. My heart beats with every thought of you. You're the one.
Watch me, he said, hugging her to stop her from leaving. Is this your idea of torture? Really, something is burning. That would be the stew, she explained, trying to get away from him. This is my idea of torture. Tell me about Ken before the whole house burns down. After I check the stew, or your prediction will come to pass. Luckily, I can afford the cost of rebuilding. I'll tell you in the kitchen. He let her go and Uma rushed into the kitchen. She switched off the cooker as Uche strolled in. She turned and her heart skipped a beat as she took in his rumpled appearance again. He looked like she had spent the last 30 minutes ravishing him instead of being angry with him. She turned back to her cooking to hide her smile. He put his hands around her waist and drew her to him and looked into the pot. Looks appetizing. Eating rice will not be a bad idea. Okay, she measured out the rice and began to wash it. Could you please add some fried plantains and beans? That is the only way I enjoy rice. Mama smiled at the easy way he said it, and she fell in love with him more because doing those homely things for him made her feel closer to him. She took some ripe plantains and began to peel them. He was fascinated by the movement of her hands. He loved the fact that she was cooking for him. How a man could feel like a king because one woman was cooking for him and become suspicious if another as much as voiced the desire to do so was beyond him. If he could answer that, then he would have answers to his deep feelings for her. When did he conclude that his feelings for her were deep? As far as he knew, what he wanted from her hadn't changed, and they were not going to change. Mma turned and faced him. Ken is a friend. We went out a few times before he began to want something more permanent. He wants to marry me. She sighed and turned back to her chopping. And you were going to marry him? Where? She teased him. He frowned and stared at her. You are going to marry him? Do you think if I was going to marry him I would be here with you? No, but I'm confused because you've called him your fiancé multiple times. Only to scare you away, she smiled. You were so arrogant and conceited, thinking I was yours for the taking. You mean all this while I've been waging a battle against no one? You can't blame me. You came into my life and all of a sudden I lost control of my once orderly life. I needed leverage. You deserve a punishment for the kind of sleepless night you have caused me. Finally, Ken and Phyllis were no longer an issue. So nothing was stopping them. She no longer had an excuse to give him. He smiled at the thought and looked around the place. The place was cozy enough, he decided. He looked up at her and gave her his best seductive smile. I am not scared. I kind of enjoy your idea of punishment. Mma laughed, oblivious to what was going on in his mind. She was happy. She had decided to give Uche and herself a chance. It was a chance she had to take. Besides, how was she going to know if he would accept her the way she was if she didn't try? The punishment this time would be different. And better, I hope, taunted Mma. Don't push me, Mince. By the way, can I help? He teased. You can start with the salad. That is if you know how to, pointing to the fridge. In my experience, the lady always says no, and then she would ask me to pour myself a drink and make myself comfortable. Uche muttered, going to the fridge. I am not like your other ladies. Uche brought out the salad ingredients and started on them. Be careful so you don't chop your fingers, Mma teased. Let me tell you something, girl. I watched plays to see myself through university, and I also was once a waiter, so I've encountered this kind of domestic duty before. With your father's wealth, you worked to pay your fees? My father felt if I work for all I achieve, I would be more able to handle the empire. He also thought that if I had little money in my hands, I wouldn't have enough to do drugs, womanize, or party about town. Mma raised an eyebrow. No wonder you are not like other rich men's sons I've come across. Really? They are always spoiled and irresponsible. Mma said, placing the fried plantains on a filter and began to dish the food. Thanks. That's the best compliment I've received from you, he said, walking past her to the dining table. Mma joined him carrying the dishes, and they sat down to eat. The meal was fun as they talked and argued. Uche complimented her cooking. He didn't expect her to be such a good cook. Where did you learn to cook this well? He asked. My mother left when I was still a baby, so I became the mother of the house at a very early age. When they were done eating, Mma cleared the table while Uche went to examine the sound system. He wanted something soft and slow to set the mood. It was time he ended this craze for her, and there was only one way he knew he could do that. He found one of his favorites and put the song on, relaxed on the couch waiting for her to come out. Mma finished from the kitchen and wiped her hands. With a smile, she went to meet Uche in the living room. When she came out of the kitchen, a cool love song wafted around the air. Her heart skipped a beat, and the room suddenly became smaller than it was. Then it dawned on her that Uche was not Ken. What in the world got her to believe that a man as virile as Uche would be over the moon with her innocence and decide to wait till their wedding night? The way he was lounging on that couch could only mean one thing. How was she going to get out of this one without totally making a fool of herself more than she had already? Then it dawned on her that his needs were not so different from hers. It was everything she wanted to, everything she had ever dreamt about. To have him touch her in places no other man had, and places no other man would. Wasn't that what she had longed for right from the first day she saw him from Phyllis's office? How was she ever going to say no then and deny herself the utter pleasure of touching him, of feeling those wonderful rippling muscles beneath her fingers? But Phyllis's advice came to her mind. Say no to him. Women dream about untouched brides. Could Phyllis be right? Could Uche be dreaming of an untouched bride? Could it be possible that beneath all those potent and heady desire he felt for her, that he would be overjoyed to find her a virgin and marry her? She thought not. And suddenly she couldn't take the assault on her senses any longer, and she wanted to bolt from the house. The choice was taken from her anyway, as Uche spoke to her. You are not planning on standing there all night? Uche said, jerking her back into reality. He had watched her looking at him as if she wanted to bolt from the house. She was afraid, he could see that perfectly, and he was puzzled. Why would she be afraid? Of course it was always frightening and exciting when one was taking a new lover. But a girl of her experience should know what her beauty alone could do to a man. He watched as his words sank into her mind, and she smiled at him casually, pushing her fright to the back of her mind for the moment, he thought, slightly amused by her fears. Of course not, she said, moving to sit down on an armchair. He expected that, of course. He knew she would choose a chair that would put her as far away from him as possible, and a chair that was too small for him to want to join her in it. He was determined to have his way, but he wasn't going to act like a caveman and drag her to sit with him. All he needed was some finesse, and she would become more than a willing partner. Suddenly it dawned on him that he didn't know what to do. This situation was new to him. Usually most of his women were more than willing. Contrary to all the rumors about him, he wasn't into heartless debauchery like they all thought. He hardly seduced women, but for the first time in his life, here was a woman who was not willing to become his bed partner. Was she different? Or was she just putting on an act to make him desperate and at her mercy? He smiled. If that was her game, she had failed woefully. There is enough space here for both of us, standing up to draw her to the couch. Mma sat down beside him nervous, wondering why she had let him draw her to the couch. What was wrong with her? Had she totally gone insane? Here she was acting like a starry-eyed teenager when her virtue and her vow were at stake. But she knew somehow that she had nothing to fear. She was sure that he would be angry, but she was also sure he would never force himself on her. Uche would love a willing and experienced woman who knew what she was doing. Relax, I'm not going to bite you, he whispered into her ear, and she shuddered as his breath touched her ears and found herself relaxing. Then she realized that not only did she love him, she also trusted him. Probably she needed to have him this way to explain to him why she was going to say no to this. Mma picked up the remote control. She was looking for what to do to put off what she was going to say a while longer, because she was also aware that his reaction would determine her future with him. She heaved a sigh and turned the music off. Uche looked at her as the music stopped, and she smiled at him and turned on the television. There is this series I like watching. It will soon be on air, she said, trying to divert his thoughts. He grimaced and took the remote control from her and switched it back to the music. Really, he was getting angry with her games. This fits the mood better, he said, and started kissing her. He was not going to give her the chance to wriggle out of his hands again. As usual, Mma felt her resistance melting away. He had kissed her before, and still they didn't feel inclined to take it further. Why should this particular kiss be different? She felt her hand circle his neck, and Uche sighed. He knew she had been fighting with her mind ever since, but it seemed as if she had made up her mind at last. Then he raised his head and looked at her. You are beautiful, he murmured. Oh God, help me, she cried silently. Uche, she called quietly. I don't want to do this, she said softly but firmly. Uche stopped instantly because he heard her. It was his nature to listen. What kind of game was she playing? He was fast becoming irritated. Only a few moments ago he had felt her shudder from his touch, and he knew she wanted him as much as he did her. Why? He asked. He couldn't hide his surprise. Because I am not that kind of a girl, she answered, angry at herself. For goodness sake, you could do better than that. She scolded herself silently, but all her thoughts had fled. She didn't even know how to explain herself to him. What kind of a girl are you? He asked, sitting up. Every person in this world has some kind of belief or guiding principle. I was brought up to believe that sex is sacred and should be practiced only within the sacred bonds of marriage, dreading the look on his face. Uche was greatly astonished, and he wanted to laugh. Was this her way of telling him that he must marry her if he wanted a piece of her? Women, he thought, they were all the same. I know you might think I'm naive and a blast from the past, but they are my standards and I cannot compromise them. Uche was speechless. He was getting angrier by the minute. How could she just sit there and calmly try to lure him into marriage without so much as by your leave? Her acting skills were very sincere though. She looked frightened. Are you a virgin? She heard him ask. No words came out of her mouth, so she nodded wordlessly and looked down on her entwined finger nervously. She heard him heave a sigh, and she stiffened herself waiting for his reaction. There was no way she could still be a virgin. Had he not seen her with different guys and at different occasions? Was she trying to say that all those men were nothing more than casual escorts? Could she honestly sit there and tell him that Ken had no intimate knowledge of her? He had had enough. He wasn't going to sit and watch a mere child play with his mind. No woman, no matter how beautiful, could force, lure, or scheme her way into becoming his wife. Why do women think that he was so foolish that any woman could become his wife by flaunting a beautiful body or by claiming innocence they lost in their mother's womb? He looked at her and he wondered what made her think he wanted a virgin in the first place. In this time and age, virginity did not represent purity or high morals. It only represented lack of opportunity. Uche stood up. I should be leaving, he said calmly to answer her unspoken question. You didn't say anything? She asked quietly. That is because I don't want to make this situation more awkward than it is already. I don't understand. She didn't know why she was persistent. Then she realized that her mind understood the fact that if Uche walked out from that door, he would never come back. And she felt like crying all of a sudden. What part of it don't you understand? You said I cannot touch you unless I am willing to make you my wife. And I have no intention of doing that. So what is the point in staying? Mma gasped with shock. So all this white has been about my body? Surprised? I was too, finding out very calmly that all this while it has been about becoming Mrs. Okoha. She looked at him with shock. You cannot mean that? For the past 1 month, we have been seeing each other and I have been greatly puzzled by your games, but now I get it. All those show of intelligence, all those screaming when I kiss you, all that anger was nothing but a show to make me think you are different and give you the coveted title of Mrs. Okoha. But this is the last straw. I am not on the lookout for a virgin. He began to walk out. Mma was close to tears, but she refused to cry. She had always known he would react this way, but what she didn't guess was how devastated she would become. She was just a breath away from calling him back and allowing him to have his way with her. But for what? For a man who had just confirmed that he wanted nothing but a fling with her? No, she was not going to call him back. She was going to put her life back together like she always did. She turned away. She was afraid that she would call him back if she saw him leaving. Uche watched her sitting down, looking forlorn, uncertain and scared. He had never seen her that way, and his heart went out to her. He wanted to go to her and comfort her, but then he thought, her reaction could be part of her plan. Look pitiful enough so that he wouldn't have the heart to leave. Please leave, Mma heard herself say. I am sorry that was the impression you got, but it wasn't what I intended. I would agree that becoming Mrs. Okoha has its merits, but honestly, those merits do not fascinate me. Uche hesitated only for a fraction of a second and left. The shutting of her door sounded like the shutting of a prison gate, and all of a sudden everywhere became quiet. So she had truly lost him? Not for a while, but forever? She let the tears fall then.
In the still of the night, I think of you. My heart beats with every thought of you.